I may have a body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too. It's just so famous and so memorable. It's one of the most famous speeches, even if people don't really know who said it or the full speech. Everyone pretty much knows I may have a body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too. It's just so famous and so memorable. I was on the search for Elizabeth's camp, well, the Tilbury Camp, where Elizabeth went and saw her troops, headed by her favourite Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. There's nothing there to show that it is such a significant place in British history.
I've come to Tilbury and I'm in West Tilbury. Now Tilbury is the site of the famous Tilbury speech given by Elizabeth I at the Spanish, or supposedly during the Spanish Armada. And it's one of one of these enduring legends about Elizabeth. The speech itself. I've got a few versions of the speech which I'm going to read out to you in a short while when I'm out the wind, where the speech took place and when it took place. So let's look at the where and the when. So the when. She in fact delivered her speech something like 10 days after the major skirmishes in the Spanish Armada put pay to the Spanish fleet. The Spanish fleet, things were really against them. The English did quite well, but the wind was just blowing against them, and they'd been effectively defeated, or it looked like they were going to be defeated 10 days before Elizabeth gave her rousing speech to the troops which had gathered here at Tilbury in case of an invasion. So now for the where. So I'm trying to find the where. Now you'd expect that with such a famous monarch, with such a famous speech, there might be something here. You'll probably not believe how little there is here. I'm going to turn the camera around because I'm looking at a place called St Luke's Church, which has been here. It looks Norman to me, actually. But it certainly was here during the time of Elizabeth. And the place where Robert Dudley had set up camp here, because he was in charge of the troops here, the place where he'd set up camp here was supposedly near to a windmill next to the church. Now the windmill has long gone. The church is still there. The church is actually a private home, believe it or not. I've just been up there. I don't want to record outside of there because obviously I know it's a private home, but even still, with the archway into the graveyard and the order of service still up, the board outside to say when services are is still there as well. It's incredibly well preserved, and it doesn't really look like a private house, but it is. So that's the church where there was a windmill nearby, and so we know that they were on a hill. Now if I pan around, you will see that below me here is flats. It is flat. It's very industrial around here, actually. It looks like we're in the middle of the countryside, but it's very industrial. So I'm going to go and try and stop on the other side of this hill. Hi everyone, let me show you where I've come down. Apparently this is path 63. It's not a very well maintained path, but anyway, I think this might take us to the most likely spot for the camp where Elizabeth made her speech. Oh my goodness, I actually don't know if I can go any further. Let's see if we can get a view anyway. Found about this right spot. And you can see through those trees, you can see the Tilbury docks again.
There's two things of interest out of that speech. Well, at least two. One is it was made 10 days after her navy commanders were sure that the Spanish Armada threat had actually passed. The other is that there are multiple versions of the speech. and we'll come back to why that might be. But what I want to do is take you through some of the versions that I have. We have versions from a writer who was there, who was possibly a soldier. His name was Aske. We have a guy called Delaney, who was sort of the Tudor equivalent of a journalist. We have an eyewitness account from a guy called Lee, William Lee, and we also have the version that we've come to know was written down by a guy called Dr. Sharp. He's chaplain to Robert Dudley, but he wrote a letter to the Duke of Buckingham, and that's where we get the version of the speech from. So I'll go through some of them, and then we'll talk about the themes of them, because there's the theme that runs through them all, which we'll see. So Aske was saying that Elizabeth said she was going to fight alongside her troops, sort of like a Roman goddess of war. She promised that she would be by their side. She promised that they would be rewarded, which was significant because there were issues and grumbles around the soldiers getting paid at this time. She said things like, "The meanest man who shall deserve a mite, a mountain shall for his deserts receive." And Deloney, who was there, also said she was using the royal we. So when someone says it's a royal we is because the monarch is talking. Well, God is talking through the monarch, so that's the royal we. She was using that, saying that she was going to lead them into battle. That if our enemies do assail you, never let your stomachs fail you. Bit of a poet there. For in the midst of all your troop, we ourselves will be in place to be your joy, your guide and comfort, even before our enemies' face. So there's one. Then there's this one's interesting. This one is it's words underneath a painting titled Elizabeth at Tilbury, and it's dated 1588, and it's at St Faith's Church in Gaywood, which is near King's Lynn in Norfolk. And underneath this painting it says, "It may be they will challenge my sex, for that I am a woman, so may charge their mould, for they are but men whose breath is in their nostrils, and if God do not charge England with the sins of England, we shall not need to fear what Rome or Spain can do against us." So this is 3 versions we're up to already, and the themes throughout them are similar. Elizabeth is going to fight, they're going to be rewarded, it's the just cause. She's going to be there by their side. Now, when she delivered her speech, the accounts do talk of her in armour, on her horse, as if to do battle. So then we have William Lee, who was an eyewitness at the time. Now, he preached a sermon about Queen Elizabeth at Tilbury, but it wasn't made public, or his version wasn't made public for another 24 years, which cast a little bit of doubt on there. But let's go through it anyway. So in his sermon, she said, "Come on now, my companions at arms and fellow soldiers in the field, now for the Lord, for your Queen, and for the kingdom. For what are those proud Philistines, that they should revile the host of the living God? I have been your prince in peace, so will I be in war. Neither will I bid you go and fight, but come and let us fight the battle of the Lord. The enemy perhaps may challenge my sex, for that I am a woman. So may I likewise charge their mould, for that they are but men, whose breath is in their nostrils. And if God do not charge England with the sins of England, little do I fear their force. Si Deus nobiscum que contra nos. If God is with us, who can be against us?" So again, that's you've even got similar words there. You've got her talking about they might challenge because I'm a woman, and but they're just men as well, and God is on our side. We will fight for the cause. God will be our judge. So Elizabeth, as we've seen when we've been talking about her portraits, this idea or this version, she's a woman, she's the virgin, she has wed herself to her country and her kingdom and her people, still runs through her speeches at this time as well. So now let's go to the famous words. Now you can see why this one would be the Hollywood version, if you like. This is the one that we see in the films, because it's absolutely wonderful, which has made some historians say that it's not the actual speech. It's too perfect. Now, let's go through it and then we'll talk about that. So here we go. My loving people, we have been persuaded by some that are careful for our safety to take heed how I commit myself to armed multitudes for fear of treachery. But I tell you that I would not desire to live to distrust my faithful and loving people. Let tyrants fear. I have so behaved myself that under God I have placed my chiefest strength and safeguard in their loyal hearts and goodwill of my subjects. Wherefore I come amongst you at this time, not for my recreation and pleasure, being resolved in the midst and heat of battle to live and die amongst you all, to lay down for my God and for my kingdom and for my people, mine honour and my body, even in the dust. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and of a king of England too, and take foul scorn that Parma or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm, to which rather than any dishonour shall grow by me, I myself will venture my royal blood. I myself will be your general, judge, and rewards of your virtue in the field. I know that already for your forwardness you have deserved rewards and crowns, many, and I assure you in the word of a prince you shall not fail of them. In the meantime, my lieutenant general shall be in my stead than whom never prince commanded a more noble or worthy subject. She's talking about Leicester there. Not doubting, but your concord in the camp and your valour in the field, and your obedience to myself and my general, we shall shortly have a famous victory over these enemies of my God and of my kingdom. So it's really, when you look at the four different versions of the speech, there are themes running through them all, which confuses me then as to why anyone would sort of be so critical of the idea that the speech took place at all. Now, you could say that it was a piece of theatre, the way Elizabeth dressed herself, the way she went and saw the troops even after really the threat of the Spanish Armada had gone. There is obviously this element, large element of management, of management of how people see her, what people believe in her, and it was, I think it could be, it could almost be not 100% faithful to the goings on at the time, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a cynical move to go and make this speech when really the threat had passed. Because although the threat might have passed of that particular Spanish Armada, there was effectively a price on Elizabeth's head throughout Catholic Europe. The Pope wanted rid of her, which effectively put the equivalent of a fatwa on her head. And so the threat might have been over at this time. That didn't mean that the threat wasn't going to come back. So Elizabeth needed to manage, to come across to her people as somebody that they wanted to fight for, that somebody who was giving as much to her people as she was expecting back. It is an amazing piece of oratory. The other thing I'll say about the different versions is that the speech was given. It was then written and given out to troops who wouldn't have heard it. So the speech was given. It was then written and given out to troops who wouldn't have heard it. So it was sort of passed around the camp, if you like. So we have those versions. Then there are the obviously the eyewitness accounts who have tried to write it all down afterwards. So, and it's also not unlikely that Elizabeth might have given that speech a number of times over the time, because everyone wouldn't have been able to hear it at the same time. Either way, I think the messages that go through the different versions are very similar. She made the speech. She talked about the fact she was a woman, but she knew that might put people's loyalties perhaps at, they might have worried about a woman on the throne. Remember, the only woman queen we'd had up to this point was Mary I, and the country had been thrown into turmoil by the actions of Mary, both religiously and politically, and in her marriage. So we've got her saying, I'm a woman, but I am as strong as I can be for you, and God is on our side. And it was effective. It worked. It rallied her troops, and it's still known to us today.